And there we go. Okay, so for today's session, I don't really have an agenda that we have prepared to cover. So I'm kind of relying on you guys to tell me what you'd like to have covered. I think I'll start off doing some purchase scenarios. Maybe I'll show you the move up presentation, because if you haven't seen that one, that's a really good one to check out. Or we can cover the MI options if you'd like. Just let me know what you'd like to see, and we'll go ahead and do it. So for right now, for those of you who are brand new to the software, probably the easiest report you can put together is a purchase total cost analysis. And when you're doing those, all you're going to do is start off with new client, and then you have the option here to make it either a marketing report or one that's specific to an individual borrower. Now the difference between these two is when you choose individual, it will have borrower information on it, so first and last name, and it will have the property address. Now, if you're going to do it as a marketing report, what it does is it strips off the borrower information. So you're just looking at putting a report headline here, and there will be no property address shown on the presentation. For this one, I'm going to do an individual, so you guys can see what that looks like. And I'm going to call this one First-Time Home Buyer Sample. And actually, I think what I'll show you when we're doing this is I'll show you how to use the MCC Tax Credit, so you guys are aware of what that is. And of course, you want to make sure and check with your lender to see if you can offer that program. And you want to check your guidelines to find out exactly how much interest can be written off and what the caps are. But I'll show you what that looks like when we get a little further into this program. So in this case, if I choose rent here, it's actually going to try and walk me through a rent versus own, which is okay. We can do that. For the case of today's conversation, I'm going to choose a total cost analysis. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to leave it on own, even though they don't own a property. And the reason I'm doing this is so it stays total cost all the way through, which means my analysis screen is going to show the total cost analysis instead of trying to show me a rent versus own. So a couple more important things on this front screen here. Make sure and enter who it's referred by, just so you can keep this for your notes. Partner email, this is pretty important. If you're, especially on a first-time homebuyer presentation, you probably got a realtor partner that you're working with, and while you can't co-brand the total cost analysis, there's a couple of things that you can do to get close to it. One of them is entering the partner email here. When you enter a partner email, on the last screen of the presentation, you're going to be given the option to check a box to have your partner automatically get notified when the presentation is viewed, just like you do. So if you don't have a partner email in here, you will not get that checkbox, so just keep that in mind. Now, friendly name, if this is a marketing report, I wouldn't put a friendly name, but since it's not a marketing report, I've just got a borrower name here, I'd probably want to indicate what type of report this is. So for instance, this is a move-up buyer presentation. Now, I should point this out to you. If you're not aware, there actually is an import feature here in Edge that will allow you to import Fannie Mae files. So if you wanted to use that, if you already had this person in your loan origination system and you just wanted to pull over some basic information from that system, you can choose Fannie Mae here. And as long as you've exported a Fannie Mae file from your origination system, you have the option of making it a proposed mortgage, which would be for purchases, or current mortgage. Now that would be for refinances. So if you've got a loan in your system that you want to refinance against, you're going to bring that Fannie Mae in as a current mortgage. For today's discussion, though, I'm not going to do an import on this one. I'm just going to do it from scratch. And actually, it looks like we've got a comment from Todd. He says, I'm looking for basic beginner coverage for multiple purchase price and program scenarios. Okay, no problem, Todd. We'll do that. So let me change this over. And we'll see if we can, if you guys want to see the move-up buyer presentation, we can show you that a little bit later in the call. Just let me know if that's the one you'd like to see. Jennifer's question, she says, system, could that be from Point or Calyx for the import of the file? So the Fannie Mae file, you can export a Fannie Mae from Calyx Point. And it's actually very easy in Calyx. All you do is you go to the file menu, and when you choose file, there's going to be an export function. And when you hover over export, you're going to see two options for Fannie Mae files. If you have an older version of Point, you'll see Fannie Mae 3.0, and then you'll see a 3.2. You always want to choose the 3.2 option there, because that's the one that's the most current. Most systems don't even accept the 3.0 option anymore. So if you're going to export a Fannie Mae file from your origination system in Point, it's just File, Export, and then Fannie Mae 3.2, and it'll give you the option to actually save that Fannie Mae to your desktop. Once you've got it saved, you can use the import feature here inside Edge. Now in Encompass it's a little bit different. There's some more security locks in Encompass that if your administrator has set may not allow you to export Fannie Mae files. If you'd like to see a video walkthrough on how it would look like if your administrator does allow for the export, shoot us a note over at support@mortgagecoach.com. I made a video on this some time back, and it'll show you kind of a little bit of a workaround. Basically, you're going to submit to a bogus lender that you're not actually connected to so that you can retrieve a Fannie Mae file. But if you guys would like to see how that process looks, shoot us a quick note over at support, and we'll get you a video for that. All right, so in this case, we're going to go with Todd's suggestion, and we're going to do some multiple purchase price scenarios. So for friendly name here, I'm just going to call it purchase options. And one thing to remember for all of you beginners here, these right and left arrows inside the wizard, they're your save points. So what happens is anytime you've entered information here, if you hit the right arrow, that saves it to our database. So keep that in mind. Anytime you want to come into Edge and make a change and you want it to reflect on the live report, just make sure you always hit one of these arrows after you make the change. It'll save it for you. So in this case, I'm going to call this one Purchase a New Home. Now the purchase goal is actually kind of important for the MCC credit. You have to choose this Purchase a New Home goal in order to initiate the MCC credit availability. There's also another section I'm going to show you in just a moment where you set the MCC parameters. Now this screen here, you can tell most of this is for refi, so you actually don't need a whole lot here, but what I would tell you is at current property value, that's what you want to put your base sales price here. Now in this case, if we're looking at different purchase price options, it really doesn't come into play that much, but if you don't fill in this field, you're going to get an exclamation point down here in on the Assumptions tab. So I usually like to use the low purchase price, so let's say $200,000. Now, another reason to input this is when you do get into the products, Edge will automatically carry this purchase price over as your purchase price for a new product. So it's one less point of data entry. Now, the next step here is the affordability section. Now, you'll notice that there's actually a lot of fields in Edge that are not in red. That means they're not required. You don't have to fill them in. But there are advantages to filling in a lot of these fields. For instance, if you do complete the gross income field, you are going to get a debt ratio on your presentation. If you don't complete it, you won't see that at all, or it'll just be wrong. The non-mortgage debt, this actually factors into the other ratio. So you got two debt ratios. You got the housing ratio, and then you got the total ratio. This one would figure into the total ratio. So this is kind of just helping you to pre-qualify this person. Now, savings balance, this is actually their current savings account, so what they have in the bank right now. Now, this actually does become important for when you're dealing with a first-time home buyer, because at the end of the presentation, what's going to happen is Edge is going to try and subtract the cash to close from their current savings, and it's going to give them an adjusted savings balance that's going to keep growing going forward. Now, this is important for when you're doing multiple purchase price options, because you want to make sure and account for the money that the borrower would have left in the bank as a result of which option they choose. So I'm going to put in that they have $10,000 in the bank. Actually, let's do about 15. And we'll say that they've got a dismal savings rate of 0.2. Now, this is also a good conversation piece for you, especially if you're working with CPAs and financial planners. If you are having that conversation, obviously your financial planners are going to be able to give you a better look at a portfolio that might work for your client that's going to have a much greater rate of return. In those cases, you can actually kind of shift this money over to the investment account. I won't go into too much detail on that one. I'm going to try and keep this one simple so you guys can see what it looks like. Now, tax bracket. The tax bracket, if you choose not to enter the tax bracket, you will not see a tax benefit line at all on your presentations. If you do want to see the tax benefit, enter a tax bracket here. And you can find your borrower's tax bracket by hitting this Find Tax Bracket button. It's going to take you to the IRS site, and it's going to walk you through a couple of quick questions. Man, actually, it's not even a couple of quick questions. Let me show you what it looks like. So you can see that all you're going to do is you're going to answer one question. What's their filing status? Let's say they're married filing jointly. And then all you do is take a look at what their range is. So if they were between 72 and 146, they're going to be a 25% tax bracket. So all we do is jump back over into Edge, and we're going to put our 25% tax bracket. And it looks like we do have a couple people in the box saying they do want to see that move-up buyer presentation, so I will cover that right after we finish this first-time home buyer. Now, this affordability section here, if you're actually taking the application, if you're talking to the borrower, these are great questions to ask them. If you haven't contacted the borrower yet, or you're putting this out more as a preemptive kind of report, you really probably don't know this information, so don't worry about it. You can bypass this one and come back to it if you want to fill it in, but none of these are required fields, so feel free to bypass the screen altogether. So now we get into the new products, and let's say for this one I'm going to show an FHA 3.5% down. And in order to show an FHA so that you can get that upfront MIP field, you got to make sure to check the yes right here. This is an FHA program. Now you can enter your down payment either in the form of a dollar amount or as a percentage. You can toggle back and forth using this button right here. So I'm going to put in my 3.5%. You can see it automatically calculates my base loan amount. Now remember, this does not include the upfront MIP. We're going to have a different section where we're going to enter that, so I'll show you that in the next screen. We're going to put in the rate that we can get them right now, say about 4.5 on a 30-year term. This is going to be a fixed loan. If this was going to be an adjustable rate mortgage, what you do is you change the loan type to ARM. And that's actually going to give you an additional data entry screen that you can put in all the caps and adjustments. To keep it simple for today, I'm going to keep these as fixed loans. And then also, if you guys ever need to see more detail on how to enter ARM, hit your help button up here. This is going to take you to our knowledge base, and then just type in ARM in the search box. And there's multiple videos that show you things like how to enter an ARM that's already adjusted, how to enter a current HELOC that's tied to prime. There's all kinds of goodies in there. So if you wanted to see how to actually put together all the adjustments on an ARM, check that video out. It's about a 5 or 6 minute video, and it'll just show you all the details. Now, if there was an interest-only period, I'd want to put how many interest-only months are in here. If this was a balloon, and this is usually only going to take place on a second lien, say like a 30 due in 15, I'd want to put where that balloon starts. So on a 30 due in 15, this would be month 180. But on a first lien, you're usually not going to use a balloon payment. So next step is your closing costs. Now, 2 ways to do it. If you're brand new to the system and you haven't yet created your templates, you really should invest half an hour and just print out a couple of your fee worksheets from different programs that you offer, and then go into this closing cost detail. And you can actually do it in your settings as well if you'd like, but I like doing it on the individual loan products themselves because you can save them as a template from here, so you don't have to get out of this presentation. Now to do that, basically you're just going to keep adding line items, so add fee, and then you're going to select the ones we have in here. So things like the appraisal fee, you'll have credit, so on and so forth, all the way down to title insurance, all, recording fees, all that kind of good stuff. Now, if you find that you have a fee on your fee worksheet that is not represented in our drop-down list here, you can add a custom fee. In order to do that, hit Add Custom Fee, and let's say that you have one called Escrow Fee, which is not represented in our fee list. That is an APR fee. You would hit OK there, and that fee is going to be available in your drop-downs from here on out. So if you were to hit the drop down, you can see it's at the very bottom of your fee list now. So it's not one of the ones that we've set up for you. It's one of your custom fees. Now you can edit your custom fees as well. If you wanted to go back and change that later, you can actually go into your settings area, and there's a space on the fee templates area where you can edit custom fees. Now for today's discussion, I'm going to show you the other way to do it too. And actually before I get there, I want to show you the Save As template. Once you've got one of these completed, and you've got your dollar figures in there, you got your APR checkboxes the way you want them to look, you're going to hit Save As template. And when you do that, it gives you the option to name this and specify if it's only available for a certain state. If it's going to be available for all your programs and it's not state specific, just don't enter a state here. So in this case, let's say that this was, I'm just going to call this one sample fee template, and hit OK. Now that fee template will now be available anytime I come into Edge. So if I enter a new product, I can always come up here to this drop-down box and select the fee template that I created. You can see I've got a bunch of them in here. So for instance, my FHA 3.5% down, I had already completed this. Now you notice there's a couple of fields I leave blank in my templates. And the reason I leave these blank is because oftentimes title fees are really difficult to deal with because they have multiple operators. They're not just a percentage of the loan amount. They're a percentage plus a certain amount, or they differ between different title companies. So when those kind of things happen, usually I recommend leave those fees blank so that you can input them on a case-by-case basis. If you have ones that are specific and they're hard-coded fees for different title companies, I would actually create separate templates for separate title companies. So for instance, American Title is going to have a certain type of fees. I might name this one FHA 3.5 American Title. That way I know that my fees are going to match up the way they're supposed to. Now, you also have the option of just disclaiming yourself against this. If you don't know what the title fees are going to be yet because it hasn't run through your system, it's okay not to enter them. Just make sure you put something in your notes that says title fees will be assessed at close, something like that. But just make sure that your borrower is aware that there may be additional fees that you're not aware of yet because it's pre-GFE. You haven't contacted the title company, you haven't pulled their credit, you haven't done any of this stuff. So this is all an educational piece for your borrower so that they can make the right decision on a loan. Then you can get that process started. Now, the same thing for the hazard insurance and tax reserves. We don't have a way to give you a monthly multiplier on this, and I know that all of your systems use a monthly multiplier. Now, the problem with this is this particular fee screen is before the screen that we ask you for what their monthly costs are. So we don't know what to multiply it against at this point. Now, that said, we're looking into ways to make that a little bit more fluid for you, and we might actually end up changing the wizard flow just a little bit to pull those monthly costs before the fee template so that we can give you a multiplier. So we're working on that. We're aware that that is a challenge for people, and we'll try and make that one better for you. All right, so I'm going to cancel out of here because I do want you to see that you can also just do ballpark fees. You don't necessarily have to itemize everything. It's always nice to have the itemization, but remember, it's all pre-GFE. You don't have to be spot on with it. So for instance, if I know that my APR costs are going to be about $2,500, I'm going to have 15 days of prepaid interest. I'm going to have about $1,000 in hazard insurance reserves, tax reserves, and then non-APR costs, let's say I've got another $1,000 worth of that. Now, it's things like your appraisal and credit. APR costs are things like your loan origination fee, escrow settlement, that kind of stuff. If you'd like to see a list of which fees should apply to the APR and which ones do not, send us a note over at support, and we'll shoot you out our list. Now, you can also find that in our help menu. So if you went to help and then just typed in fees, you'll see that there's an article in there called which fees should apply to the APR. So feel free to check that one out as well. Now, contributions can be used for any contribution. This could be a seller contribution, a lender contribution, a broker contribution for that matter. And what this does is this simply knocks down the cash to close by whatever amount you put in here. And it's gonna actually knock down the non-APR costs in the end. So the reason we did it this way is because these contributions usually aren't supposed to knock down the APR. So when you put something in here, it'll just knock down cash to close without affecting your APR at all. Now, if you have a program where the contribution is supposed to offset the APR costs and you're doing ballpark fees like this, you're basically just going to reduce your APR cost by the amount of that credit. So let's say that I've actually got a lender credit of about $1,500 here. Now, the last section, for all FHA loans, you're going to make sure and put in your upfront MIP. Now, you'll need to refer to your guidelines on this. So if you don't have the upfront MIP right here, you probably didn't check the FHA box back over here. So make sure you've got that one checked. But refer to your guidelines for the upfront MIP. It's 1.75 for this particular program and this particular loan amount. And you can see that once I tab off that field, it actually gives me a checkbox to add this to the loan amount. So you can finance this in. Jennifer's question real quick. She says, my screen doesn't look like yours. Is there an update I am missing? Not sure, Jennifer. This is actually all live through the browser, so there wouldn't be any update that you're missing. If you could tell me the specifics on what's different on your screen, I might be able to isolate what the problem is. All right, and actually Will mentioned that it may actually be a screen issue. You may want to try and go to full screen, and you can do that by hitting F11 on your keyboard. If you're noticing that some of the fields may be kind of hidden, might have some toolbars pushing it out of the way. All right, so we finished with our closing costs here. We've got all our ballparks in. We've got our upfront MIP, and it's financed into the loan amount. The next step is your monthly costs. And if you happen to know these already, which you probably don't on a purchase option, you can actually enter the dollar amount, but I like doing factor percentages. The reason for these is that when you use factor percentages and you choose to copy one of these products to another slot, it copies that percentage with it, so it automatically recalculates what that property tax and hazard insurance should be based on the new loan. Now, mortgage insurance, very important for FHA loans. These do have to carry mortgage insurance, and they have to carry it for the life of the loan when they're high LTV like this. When they're low LTV, you can actually you only have to carry it for 11 years, and then if you're at 78%, you can drop the MI. So in those cases, it's a little different. You're not gonna carry it for the life, but I'll show you what to do on that. So we'll enter our 1.35 mortgage insurance factor. Very important for government loans. All of these, the MI is recalculated every year based on an average 12 months balance. In order to get your MI payment right on a government loan, you got to hit this checkbox. If you don't hit the checkbox, you can see that I got a totally different mortgage insurance amount here. It's based on the full loan amount rather than the average balance. So we want to make sure to check that box. Now the last critical part here is for an FHA loan, it's got to carry the life of the loan. So I'm putting my MI cutoff month at 360. Now if I was to leave this one at 0, assuming that, well, the MI cutoff month shouldn't exist, it's only going to apply the 78%, which means this MI is going to drop off, and it's not supposed to. This is supposed to go for the life of the loan. So make sure to enter that 360 there. Now, if you have a low LTV FHA loan where it only has to carry 11 years and then it can drop off, you would actually put month 132 right here. And then what would happen is after month 132, if that LTV was at 78% or below, the MI drops. If it's not, it continues until it hits 78%. All right, so now I'm going to add an additional product. To do that, you just hit Add Another Product. And this is where the copy button comes into play, because you don't want to redo all the legwork you just did. Instead, you're going to copy that first product. So I'll hit Copy From, and I'm going to copy my FHA product. Now, as Todd was asking about earlier, we can show different price structures on this. So the initial one was, 3.5% was $7,000, but what if we wanted to show a property at $210? What we do is we'll just change the purchase price, and as soon as I do that, it automatically recalculates my down payment percentage. My interest rate's probably going to be the same here. Since I copied, all my fees came over. It recalculated my upfront MIP based on this new loan amount, and it recalculated my property tax and hazard insurance based on the new loan amount as well. You can see my MI factor it's the same, but the actual MI payment is a little bit different. So all of this legwork is done for me. All I really have to do is go back and name this product. So I would probably put something like FHA 210K. Now, that might be a little confusing because of the 203K, but maybe reduce the K out. There we go. Something like that. But you'll notice that I keep my product names really short. And the reason I do this is you don't have to over disclose what the product is here. And for best results, if you know this is going to be printed, if you use a really long product name, it's not all going to fit in print. So you want to keep this one, you want to keep this in mind, that keep your product names under about 12 characters if you're going to show 4 products, and all your stuff's going to fit in print. Jim's question, he says, why isn't the MI tax deductible button clicked? So actually this is up to you, Jim. You have the option of making it tax deductible if you'd like. It is still currently tax deductible, but as you know, they vote on this every year. So for next year's tax season, it may not be. So it's up to you if you want to do this. I also would I would say that if you're going to show tax benefit, which I did because I put in a tax bracket in my affordability section, anytime you're talking about tax benefit, if you don't have a designation as a CPA or something like that, you want to put something in your disclaimer language saying contact your tax advisor for full details, so, something like that. Just make sure that there's no impression that you're actually giving tax advice. What you're doing is you're giving education on what the potential tax benefit could be. So for this presentation, I'm actually leaving the MI checkbox off, but feel free to check it if you'd like to. It will factor into your tax benefit if you do that. So now, and I actually probably want to go back to that first product and name it so that it jives more with what I did for the second product. So I'm going to show you what's called jump buttons. Inside Edge, there are buttons above each one of these wizard items that allow you to jump through the wizard. So don't feel like you have to go right to left, left to right, whatever you do. You can actually jump around in here, and it's no problem at all. Now, these are jump buttons. When you hover over products, for instance, you can see I've got 2 different ones I can choose. When I click on this one, it takes me immediately over to that product. So I'm going to change the nomenclature on this one to be 200,000. And now they line up and they make a little bit more sense for my borrower. So last screen of this 210, remember we did the copy button, so everything's done here. We've got 2 different price options here. What about different program options? What if I also wanted to show conventional 5% down? or a conventional 10% down for that matter. I think that if I was showing my borrower these 3.5% down options, the reason I'm showing them is because they don't have a whole lot of cash on hand to be able to do this. But a 5% option might actually work for them as well. And as you know, there's different ways of structuring loan programs so that you can buy them out of MI using single premium buyouts. Obviously, the MI factor is going to be a bit lower on the conventional anyway, and it can drop at 78%. So it might be a better option for your borrower if they can bring, you know, a couple thousand more in for close. So what I'll do is I'll hit Add Another Product, and I'm going to call this one Conventional 200,000. And this is not an FHA program, but instead of completing all these details again, I'm going to copy. So I'm going to copy the FHA 200,000. I'm going to remove the upfront MIP. So I'm just actually going to go in here and type a 0. And it's completely removed. And I'm going to uncheck the FHA box. Now, some of you may be thinking, what about this, this toggle? Wouldn't that just remove the upfront MIP? Yes, it does. But if you have the actual upfront MIP still entered in the system, which is what happens with the copy, it's still part of the file. So it can potentially show up in some of the more info areas behind the closing costs if you're not careful. So when you're using the copy button to copy an FHA and you want to make it a conventional, I always recommend go in, remove the upfront MIP, then come back and change this toggle over to no. So for these ones, I'm doing a 5% down option. And let's say I can't get quite as good of a rate as I could on the FHA, so I'm going 4.75. You can see my upfront MIP is gone. My ballpark costs are still all the same. And if my contributions were different for a conventional loan versus what my my FHA was showing, I'd want to make sure and update that. Todd's question real quick. He says, what is the hazard insurance monthly and tax monthly percentage calculated off of, purchase price or loan amount? So the property tax is calculated off purchase price. The hazard insurance, I believe, might also be calculated on purchase price. Let me find out for you, Todd, and I will get back to you. But I believe these are both based on the property amount. I'll find out for sure, though. Okay, so last part here, since I've already got my closing costs already in there, no need to really do anything on this one. I can now go straight over to my monthly costs area, and my mortgage insurance factor is going to be different from what it was on the FHA. So I'm going to hit the percentage sign here so I can enter it over here. And let's say for these I can get a 0.9 rate. And then we want to uncheck the box to calculate on balance, because for non-government loans, this is the way you want it. And then we're going to remove the MI cutoff month area. So what this does is this tells Edge that this 142.50, it's not going to decline over time like the FHA one does, but it is going to cut off at 78% loan to value. So let's add one more product. So for this one, I'm going to do the conventional $210,000. So I'll do the copy from. I'm going to copy my conventional 200, and I'm going to rename this one. Oops. There we go. And all I'm going to do is change my purchase price here. And this actually would speak to Todd's questions a second ago. So if we look at what our hazard insurance and taxes are, we have $61.25, $218.75. And if they are both indeed set on the property value, that conventional 200 should be different. And as you can see, they are indeed both different. So these are both calculated based on property value / purchase price. Okay, so last section here, I actually want to go back one screen just to make sure my monthly costs look good on that conventional 5% on the 210. So we'll go back one screen there. And everything looks good there. My mortgage insurance factor stays the same, so these are all good. I don't need to do anything more with this. Pardon me. So now when we look at this, you can see up on the top right, we've got the varying monthly payday payments. So we can see what the differences are there. You can see what our LTVs are. And we know we've done this right because on the FHA loan, this is the total LTV. This is including that upfront MIP. But per their guidelines, this is still considered a 3.5% down loan, so it's not in violation to add that upfront MIP. Now, on the conventionals, you see we've got 95%. These are just straight 5%. Now, I haven't rolled any other costs into the loan, so all the closing costs that are not being credited are going to be added to the down payment for their total cash to close. All right, so let's go. Oh, and actually, Dennis is right. I can't make that statement about both of those being based on property tax because I did change both the purchase price and the loan amount. So my apologies. Thanks, Dennis. That's a great point out. Todd, I will get back to you on that and let you know exactly what's going on there. I'll find out the exact calculations for you. And I'll actually make a note to contact you about that. Give me 1 second. I just want to make sure I can find you in the system. All right. Great. I will follow up with you after the call, Todd, and just let you know for sure. Okay, Mike just calculated it. Thank you, Mike. Mike says they are both based on sales price. He just calculated. Thank you so much, Mike. I appreciate that. I didn't have time to look at that one right now, so very good. Thank you for your help. All right, so now we get to our analysis summary screen. And one of the things I'm going to do, I'm actually just going to go home real quick because when I'm on GoToMeeting, what's happening is this is using a lot of my network bandwidth. So I'm going to run into a cache issue, and I can tell I'm going to run into it right now. So I'm actually going to sign out. I'm going to close the browser window. I'm going to open a brand new one. If you guys ever find that you've run into a caching problem inside the browser because you've got other heavy programs like GoToMeeting or something like that running alongside it that's using your network capability, you may find that the figures that are on your live report don't match what's inside the browser. That's because the browser is caching information. And you've probably heard this from us before here in support if you've ever emailed us about the problem. The quickest solution for it is log out, close the browser entirely, open a new browser, and go straight back into Edge. This clears your cache so that it's not getting disrupted. I've found that even when I'm listening to something like Pandora, it takes a lot of network bandwidth, and it can cause a cache problem inside my browser. Now, we do have recommended settings for maintaining your cache so that you run into them a lot less. If you'd like to see those, we actually have them in our knowledge base, but if you'd like to see those, send us a note over at support, and we'll give you the recommended settings for each browser. So Chrome, IE, Firefox, whatever you're using. And if you're using Safari, do let us know because I don't think that's part of the verbiage we use, but we can certainly get that for you. All right, so let's log back in. All right, so here we go. Now, whenever you want to get back into a file that you've been in before, when you log into Edge, if it's a recent one, you'll see it in the list here, and you can actually scroll this list pretty far to see your recent 10 or 15. But if it's not in that group, say for instance you originally did this a couple of months ago, you can get back to this particular program by hitting View All. And this is actually why the friendly names are so important. So if I just filter by FTHB, you can see that it pulls up my first-time homebuyer sample. But if I had made multiple reports for this client, the only way I can tell them apart is the friendly name. So that's why I use purchase options for my friendly name. This becomes very, very important when you're doing the partner reports, because usually for one partner, you're going to have a lot of different listings that you're doing open house flyers for, and the only way to tell them apart is to use that friendly name field and put the address in it. That way you know exactly which report is for which property. Now to open this guy, I'm going to click on the individual report, and I'm going to hit Open Analysis. Now, this brings us right back into the wizard. We can jump to any point in the wizard we'd like. So, you know, if I wasn't done putting in my products, for instance, I could jump over to my last product and continue on in the wizard. Now, I did finish putting in all my products, so now I'm back at the analysis screen. And some of you may notice now why I thought I was running into a cache issue. Originally, when we went into this analysis screen, we saw that the FHA was showing a very high savings. Totally unrealistic. I knew that wasn't going to be true, so I knew I ran into a cache problem. Once I logged out, closed the browser, and came back in, all this recalculated correctly. Now, I will tell you that if I had just stayed in my session and gone over and prepared the live preview would be correct. That's actually going to show what's on our database, not necessarily what's inside your browser. So oftentimes what I do when I'm creating these is I'll just put in a client name first, and that's all you need to start a record is this first name here. And before I even go and enter all this good stuff here, I go straight to the presentation screen, click on the preview jump button, and then click on the preview button. Now the reason for this is going to open that live preview that shows exactly what's in our database. So as I'm completing this, I can jump back and forth, and I can actually just look at what's on the screen. And you'll see that if you haven't put in any products, obviously this will be empty. But as I'm putting in products, they'll start filtering in here, and you'll see them start showing up here, usually a couple seconds after you hit save. So this is a great way to check on your work. So if I'm working inside Edge, I've finished my products, and I go to the analysis screen, and I want to see what the effects are on the live report. Say, for instance, I wanted to show a reinvestment strategy of some kind. I could enter whatever data I wanted here, or maybe I just want to look at a different monthly amount. I want to look at 10 years and 30 years. When I do that, if I want these to apply to the live report, I'm just going to hit one of these arrows. And let's go take a look at the live report. And you'll see that this is 60 months right now, but this is going to update in a couple seconds here to show 120. There it goes. And you can see my long-term calculated out at 30 years as well. So this is a great way to just eyeball what's going on in the live report. And I would tell you that before you ever send out one of these presentations to your client, you should always look at your report. Just make sure it's displaying what you think it should be. If there's a problem with it, let us know in support. We'll find you a solution as soon as possible. Now on that note, support is open from 7:30 a.m. to 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. So if you're on the East Coast, we're 3 hours behind you. If you're Central, we're 2 hours behind you. If you're Mountain, we're 1 hour behind you. Now when you do send in a request off hours, sometimes I may see it when I'm on my train ride home, and I might try and do what I can to help you, but again, I'm working off a phone at that point, so please don't expect a response after hours for the most part. We will check it as soon as possible. Our team gets in bright and early, and we'll get back to you on the next business day. And yeah, Will commented on my train ride. For those of you who don't know where we're at in Southern California here, our office is in Irvine. I have about an hour drive from where I live, so I take the train instead. This is why I'm so chipper in the morning when I'm talking to you folks. It's because I've had a good hour nap before I even came into work. All right, so let's get back into this Edge presentation. Now, last step here is I probably don't need to show any kind of a reinvestment strategy, but I do want to show you why I put in a savings balance in that initial part. So if I go into my Adjust Reinvestment Strategy, you can see that it shows their savings start right here. They have $15,000 in the bank on each one of these programs. Now there's varying degrees of money that's required for close. Obviously the conventional ones are requiring a little bit more, about $3,000 more. So what Edge does is it subtracts that amount from their savings account, and you can see their new adjusted savings start. Now those funds are going to continue growing at the 0.2% rate, and you can see where they're at in 30 years. Now obviously this is not a huge growth, but what you could do is you could actually put these over into the investment accounts if you wanted, and you could earmark it for bigger growth. Jim had a question. Are you going to show us the MCC tax credit? You're absolutely right. We can apply this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back over to the affordability section. And in the affordability section, there's a button called tax credits. Now, you'll need to consult your guidelines to find out exactly what your write-off percentages are. But here in California, we have a 30% max credit, and it can credit up to $3,000 per year. Now, if you hover your mouse over it, you'll see that there's actually a bit of text that comes up that reminds you of what this is. So check on your guidelines, find out exactly how much interest. This is actually a cap. They can't deduct more than $3,000, or they can't credit more than $3,000 interest per year, and the rate that it's credited at is 30%. Now, once I've got that in play, when I go over to my products, you'll see that there's now a checkbox at the very bottom that says Apply MCC Credit. When you do that, it adds the credit to their tax benefit. So you'll see this tax benefit go up, fairly significantly. And it does it every year. So again, MCC Credit, if you're not familiar with what it is, this is only available for first-time home buyers, and it allows them to write off or to actually credit a certain chunk of their interest every single year. And as far as I know, there's no cutoff for that. So until they sell the house or refinance, they can still get this MCC credit. So it's a very hot program right now, and you should definitely take a look at it. Now, since I've got that in play, I can choose whether or not I want the MCC credit on each program. So I've got it on my first program. I'm going to go ahead and put it on my second program as well. And let's say on the conventional ones, I wasn't able to get them that particular credit. Oh, and actually, Louisa gave me a little tip pointer here. She says the MCC can actually be recertified with a refinance. So check into your guidelines. It sounds like that's even better. So thanks, Louisa. Candace's question, is it a federal credit or is it state specific? It is state specific, but what happens is each state has different guidelines for how much interest you can write off. A lot of them are kind of the same. You'll see that most of them fall either in the category of 20% and $2,000 or 30% and $3,000. Now I'll show you the effect of this MCC credit. Actually, what I'm going to do is I'll leave the FHAs with the credit, and I'll leave the conventionals with no credit so you can see what it looks like. Now when we look at our tax benefit here, the monthly area, this is not reflecting the MCC. And the reason it's not is because they're not going to get this credit until the end of the year. So the only place it's going to show up is going to be in this short-term area. Robert's question, what does MCC stand for? That is a mortgage credit certificate. Now, if we look at the tax benefit here, you can see that my tax benefit on these FHA loans is significantly higher. And remember, I didn't make MI tax deductible at all. So this is strictly a result of that extra credit they're getting from that MCC credit. So pretty strong motivator here. Now, when we're looking at this short-term area, and this is something that, especially for new users, pay close attention to what we're about to say here. Our short-term area is showing the savings between each of these loans. There's always going to be one loan with an empty graph because that's the one that's being used as the benchmark, which means everything else is showing a savings relative to that loan. Now, same thing happens down in the bottom area, but this savings over 120 months is not the monthly savings multiplied by 120. It's a totally different animal. What this is showing is we're just comparing the total costs for each program. You can see those. I'm highlighting them down at the bottom here. Now, the total costs for these are just the unrecoverable costs for each loan. Now those costs are interest and MI and then closing in points. We exclude prepaid escrows from this equation because it's not a cost of doing the loan. They're going to pay those either way. So what we do to calculate this total cost is we take that interest and MI that they paid, we subtract out the tax benefit, then we add the closing in points. That's what's giving us this figure of 53.6 here. We compare those total costs against each other, and you can see that my conventional 210 actually has the highest total cost. And that's because of this gigantic tax bracket break here. Now, if we went and removed the MCC tax credit, we'd see that this conventional 200 is probably going to be the best one. So I'll actually show you what that looks like real quick. We'll go ahead and remove the MCC. And then I'll hit my right arrow to trigger save, and we should see this show up in just a moment here. There it goes. So if we look at what our figures look like now, the highest cost is now the FHA 210, and as I thought, that conventional 200 now has the lowest total cost. That's saving the most money between the programs. And Will has a comment. He says, idea, as we mentioned, the tax advisor, ask who their CPA or advisor is. So excellent call there, Will. You know, anytime that you're doing something like this where you're talking about tax benefit or you're talking about something that's, you know, may not be your specialty, but it's something you want to educate your borrower on, it's a great chance to find the referral here. Find out who their partner is and see if you can get them in the loop, you know. Show them the report that you're putting together too. You know, copy them in. Make that the partner email on that first screen in Edge so that they get alerts when that borrower views this particular presentation. You know, you want to bring them in the loop because your expertise is the mortgage. That's what you do. You're good at that. Your tax guy can't handle that at all, but your tax guy, your CPA, he knows the tax benefit part. He can really structure that part for your borrower and give them the fine-tuned details. All right, so as you can see, removing that MCC credit, we actually ended up with, you know, significantly different numbers here. And now we're showing that our best option is, of course, that conventional 200. Now, when we look at our long-term figures, the long-term figures, I've chosen interest and MI paid in 30 years, and that's usually the one you want to choose, but you do have other options. You can show principal paid, or you can show net worth. Now, net worth, you'd want to do that if you're showing a significant type of reinvestment strategy. Say, for instance, you're partnering with a financial planner that's offering, you know, say a 4% rate of return on a mutual fund or something like that, and you've used the reinvestment strategy to show this extra money that they're not paying here going straight back into that investment account. Now, when you're doing that, you want to show net worth because net worth is a total compilation of their equity plus any liquid assets that you've managed to get for them using the strategy. So the interest in MI paid won't really reflect that. It's outside the loan. But net worth, that will. Now, when we look at the more info behind interest and MI, you can see that all we're showing is the basics here. You can see the home values across the board, and this is as a result of whatever appreciation percentage you choose in the analysis screen. Obviously, at 30 years, these are all paid off. And if we look at our equity, it's basically just whatever the property value is at the 30-year point. And you can see our total principal paid for each one. And you can see our total tax benefit for each one. Now, total interest in MI, obviously, this FHA 210 is going to be the highest one for the total interest in MI. It's probably the one I'd want to steer them away from. But again, if they need the 210 house and they've only got enough to cover that 3.5% down payment, they can't cover a 5%, this may be an option for them. But it's always good to show them that there are alternatives, and they're not much more expensive than what they're getting with the FHA. And realistically, long term, it saves them a boatload of money. You can see 223 versus 183. That's pretty significant. You're looking at a $40,000 difference between these two programs just on the unrecoverable costs. Remember, they're going to pay the same principal no matter what. It's a matter of, and actually I should be comparing the 210. So 223 versus 192 here. It's still pretty significant. You've got $30,000 in savings between these two programs. All right, so let's see if we can knock out that move up buyer presentation real quick, because I do want to show you what it is. It's a little bit advanced, so those of you who are brand new, feel free to rewatch this session if you want to. I am recording this, and I do post them every single week to our archive. So I'll show you where that's at real quick. You can just go to mortgagecoach.com, and when you get there, you're going to hover your mouse over the community section, and you're going to choose Coaching Call Archive. Now, these are the archives of all of our Tuesday and Thursday calls. So you can see that last week we had a training session covering the mobile app and creating reports for CPAs and financial planners. So kind of goes along with what we were talking about a moment ago. If you wanted to drill down into those types of reports, check this presentation out. But you can see that we've got them all in here, so if you need to revisit a certain subject, today's will be posted by the end of the day, and it will be in the bottom of the list here. All right, so let's get into our move-up buyer presentation. Now, what I'm going to do is I want to group this one under this same first-time home buyer. So I'll go to View All. I'm going to type in FTHB, and what I'm going to do is, instead of choosing the analysis I already did, I'm going to keep it selected on the top level here, and I'm going to hit Add Analysis. This is going to add another analysis underneath this same person. This is helping me group my presentations. Now, this is particularly useful for when you're doing, let's say you want to have all your purchase templates in one place, and these aren't technically templates, these are presentations, but you can copy any presentation, so you can kind of use it like a template. Now, we did a QA call a long time ago, I want to say 6 or 7 months ago, where I showed how to build your purchase arsenal. Now, that is in our Coaching Call archive. If you search down here, as a matter of fact, we can probably do find on the page. And let's see, we've got one match. There it is. So in May, actually, of 2013, this was a training call showing how to create your purchase arsenal templates. And that one shows you basically what we're talking about here, which is adding a bunch of presentations underneath the same header so that you have them all in one place and you can easily refer them. So I'm going to add an additional analysis under this one, and all I'm going to do is I'm going to change the friendly name. So in my friendly name, I'm going to choose Move Up Buyer. Now, they are going to purchase a new home, but I'm not going to check this box. And the reason I'm not is I want to show their current mortgage. I want to show what happens when they sell their current property and use the proceeds to buy a better place. So I'm going to leave that unchecked. Matter of fact, I'm not going to check any goals on this one. Now, next step here is current property value. This is on their current mortgage. So let's say they've got a house right now that's valued at $200,000. Now, when they originally took out the loan, and this actually becomes very important if they have MI. MI is calculated based on the original appraised value, not on the improved appraised value unless they get it reevaluated. So in this case, it's going to be, let's say they originally bought this at 180. Now, if you want to, you can enter the current payoff amount. It's up to you. If you don't enter it, all it's going to do is Edge will use the current loan balance as the payoff amount for a refi. This isn't going to be a refi, so it's not particularly important to enter this. Now, we do want to enter the details about their current mortgage. So let's say that they got this house a few years back, and their original loan amount was, let's say, 160. Actually, let's go up a little bit higher to make sure they have MI. So 170, and back in 2010, they got a 5.5% interest rate on a 30-year term. Now you can see that Edge calculates their remaining balance for you. So they've got 159,803. Now, loan type, if it was different, you could alter that. If it was interest-only months or anything, you could alter that as well. But you can see that Edge does also show you the P&I payment. So if you don't happen to have something like the original loan amount, which oftentimes you don't, you can find this if you know what the P&I payment is by simply just changing this around. Let's say that they told me their P&I is actually 980. So I know that this original loan amount has to be a bit more. So I'm going to try 175. And that's a little too high, so I need to probably go down a little bit. So kind of a hit and miss situation, but you can find it. So 982, pretty close. If I wanted to drill down all the way, let's try 172.5. Pretty darn close. We can just keep isolating it down. There we go. So now we're at 980. Now I know what their original loan amount was. And if I do know their current balance, I can overwrite this field with what their current balance is. For today's discussion, I'm just going to accept that that is their current balance. Now remember, their house is worth $200,000 right now. That's what we anticipate they're going to be able to sell it for. So when all the fees are taken out and everything, I'm going to say that the loan proceeds are going to be about $30,000. That's what they're going to get as the proceeds from selling the house after they've already paid all the different fees that they're going to need to pay in association with that. Now we need to make sure, if we're going to show pity payments against each other, that we also enter these here. Now you'll probably know what these specific figures are, so feel free to enter the dollar amounts on these. And let's say that when they took it out, they did have to get mortgage insurance, and they got it at a 0.75 rate. We want to cut that off at 78%. Now this is 78% of the original appraised value. Now for the move-up presentation, I may or may not want to complete all this. Tax bracket actually becomes pretty important on a move-up because they're going to get a better tax benefit from a higher priced property. But it could offset if you have a much lower rate than what they're currently paying, because they'll actually get more interest off that higher rate. So up to you if you want to show tax bracket. Might be a little confusing for a move-up, and if you don't want to try and explain it to your client, just don't enter a tax bracket here. Now, on a move-up, they're not going to be eligible for the MCC, so we're going to skip that part, and we're going to go straight into our new products. So this one I'm going to call Move Up to, let's say, $225K. And what I'm going to do is I'll put in my purchase price of $225, and then we've got to pick which kind of program we want to show them. Now, if you're doing VA loans, for instance, you can still do 100% financing, which means that 30 grand that they have doesn't even have to be really used for this. You're going to take a chunk of it for the new closing costs, but VA mortgages, the closing costs are really minimal. So those ones are particularly good for the move-up buyer. And for VAs, you can hold two loans at once. So most people don't know that. They don't have to move out. They can move up and still rent out the other property. So that said, I'm not going to show a VA for this one, but what I am going to show is them using the proceeds from their sale for the down payment. So let's say that their down payment, I'm going to put it at about $25,000. And the reason I'm doing that is I want to keep that extra $5,000 that they've got from the proceeds to pay for the new closing costs. Now, by doing that, I know that I'm going to have almost 10% here for my loan to value. You can see I'm at 81.17, so I might actually just recommend 10% here. And that way it's 22.5. So now they've got $7,500 left from their proceeds. I'll show you where this comes into play when we get into the closing costs. But let's say on this one I can get them a 4.5% rate, 30-year term again. And then I would pull in a closing cost detail template. Let's pull in a conventional here. All right, so make the edits you need to for the hazard insurance reserves. If you are going to use these templates, just come in here and let's say that's about $300. And again, it's safe to ballpark these. You don't have to be spot on. Let's say this one's going to be about $750. And then I'll just apply it to the loan. Pop in my prepaid interest days. Now, the one part I do need to account for, remember, the proceeds from the sale are going to be used to knock this down. So I'm going to go back into my closing cost detail. go down to the very bottom, and if you haven't done it before, you're going to want to add a custom fee called proceeds from sale. Now what I'm going to do, since I've already got it in my drop-down list, I've added it before, I'm just going to keep hitting P until I see proceeds from sale, because I have created this previously. Now remember, they've got 30 grand in proceeds from the sale. So what I'm going to do is negative 30,000. Now you can see that this shows borrower paid costs at negative 24.6. Obviously, that's just because this 30,000 has knocked this way down, but this 24.6 is going to apply against that down payment. Remember, the down payment is 22.5. So they're actually, this is going to show a cash back to the borrower of a couple thousand. That's what they net after all this is over. So now I'm going to hit apply to loan. One thing to note before I get out of that screen, when I created this custom fee for proceeds from sale, I made sure to make it a prepaid escrow item. Remember I told you before, prepaid escrow items don't factor into the short-term savings. Had I made this anything but a prepaid escrow item, that short-term savings is going to show some really wacky figures because it thinks I have negative $30,000 in closing costs. So make sure that for this kind of presentation, proceeds from sale or external contribution of any kind that you don't want to knock down that short-term area, check the box here. So I'll hit apply to loan. And you can see my negative costs here for the prepaid escrows. That's how I know it's in the right field. And then I'm going to put in my hazard and taxes again. And this will require MI. So let's say I can get a 0.9 factor on this right now. And then I'm just going to leave the 78% cutoff. No checkbox for the Calc MI. This is not a government loan. And I don't really even need to show more than that. Now you can see that it's going to cost them a little bit more to move up to 225. So I might want to add an additional product that shows them how they can move up to, say, 210 or something like that. So it's kind of a square deal where they're paying exactly the same amount. But the whole idea behind the move-up buyer presentation is it is going to cost them a little bit more for a bigger house. That's okay. That's acceptable. But it's not going to cost them so much that it would offset their gain from the net worth. So for a move-up buyer presentation, I always show net worth, and I'll show it over the long term here. Let's say over the 30-year point. And you can see, obviously, at 30 years, their net worth is $25,000 higher than their current one because their property's worth more. Now, I don't have an appreciation rate, so watch what happens when I put in a 3% appreciation. Now, we've got a much more significant difference. If they stay in their current property, it's going to appreciate. We know that. But by just moving into a house that's worth 25 grand more today, look what it grows to. We've now got a $60,000 disparity between our net worth between these two products. So look what it costs you over time. What if we did this for the entire term on both of them? $33,000 extra interest that they're going to pay. And look at the difference here. We've got enough. We've got enough. You know, 546. We've got $60,000. It's twice as much return on our net worth for this extra interest that we're paying. So very valuable way to show this to the client. You know, I might, like I said, show an extra one showing move up to 210. And we could do that easily by hitting add another product. Oops, I think I went back a screen on accident. Let's go back to the analysis. Hit the back button. And I know we're running a little bit over time today, so I understand if any of you have to leave on this one. But I am going to carry this call for a few minutes extra just so we can make sure we get the full explanation on this. But do feel free to duck out. I will not be insulted. All right, so I'm going to add another product here. And for this one, I'm going to call it move up to 210. Now, obviously, this is not a huge increase in their property value, but what I'm going to be able to do, and you'll see that when we copy that move up to 225 and then just make it 210, and then understanding that they still have 30 grand to work against this, I can actually probably get a better MI rate for them. You know, if I know that they have 30 grand, I can make this probably something closer to 15%, and maybe not 15, but we can get close to it. Say 13%, something like that. But up to you. You can structure this how you want. You want to check your guidelines to find out where your breaks are on the MI factors, because if you have a break at 85% versus 90, you want to try and isolate that, square it in. Now I know they have 30 grand in the bank, so this 27.3 should be no problem. There are closing costs on this, so it's probably going to go a little over what their proceeds are, which is okay. We're going to ask them to come in with a little bit extra, but you know, it's acceptable in this case. Because I copied, all my goodies came over. I don't have to worry about these guys. I should show you real quick that in the contributions area, you guys notice that there's a $500 contribution in here. What that's a result of is the owner's title is being paid by the seller. So you see here, I've got this one attributed as a seller paid fee. So that $500 is showing as a contribution. Now, because I used the copy button, everything came over, everything looks good, and you can see that my payment here, $1,342, is actually less than what they're currently paying. So I've given them $10,000 more house for the exact same payment. Now, the only difference here is going to be the cash to close. So if I go back and preview this guy, now, the one thing I didn't show is I need to show their current mortgage. Now, it's up to you. You don't necessarily have to, but it's a good idea to show it so you can see what the net worth variables are. So I'm going to go back into Edge, and I'm going to hover over Presentation, and I'm going to choose Select Report. Now, you can see my current mortgage is unchecked, so I'm going to make sure to check that. And if you guys haven't seen the payment notes here, you do need to be aware of these. This is your notes field. This is where you can add the additional jargon like we were talking about, where you disclaim yourself as, I'm not a CPA, consult your tax advisor. You can also put things in here to include, to say whether you're including the taxes and insurance. If you're just showing P&I payments, you want to say that. But usually I would put something like this, payments include estimated hazard, oops, there we go, insurance and property taxes. Now that's going to show up right beneath the pity payment on the report. So now that we've got those all in there, if I jump back over to my report, since I just hit the save button, it'll take a couple of seconds, but we should see their current mortgage pop into view. And there we go. So as you can see on the current mortgage, we're showing a pretty significant savings here. But what if we just want to benchmark against the current mortgage? We never want to show a savings on the current. So what we can do is we can show a negative savings on this 225 and a negative savings on this 210. To do that, go back into Edge, go straight to your analysis screen, and then all you're going to do is these drop downs right here allow you to select which one is being used as the benchmark. Now by default, they're going to select the highest. That's the 225. But what if I want to select the current? All I'm going to do is I'm going to do that. And you can see that this move up to 225, yeah, it's going to cost you $129 more. This move up to 210, it's not going to. It's going to cost you $6 less. I can do the same thing in this bottom left area. So I'll select current, and you can see these are what it's going to cost you. You can move up to a better house. You've got a couple of options. It's going to cost you this much more for these. But look at your net worth. You know, when we're looking at between the current and this move up, remember, it's costing them 30 grand here, but they're netting significantly more. They're netting 60 grand off this net worth. And we look at this 210, this one is not as much, but remember, it costs them less too. So it's costing them $13,700 over the life of the loan, but look what they're netting out of it. So they've still got a $30,000 net, a little bit less, $25,000 net off of this. So, you know, would you pay $13,000 to get 25? I think you would. You know, and I think it's a great conversation to have with your borrower. All right, so the last step to preparing any of these presentations, I know I kind of skipped it in the early one, is this one in particular is a specific borrower report. So I'd probably want to put in the property address that we're dealing with so they understand what we're talking about. So something like 123 Any Street. Everybody knows where this is. Any town in California. All right. And then I'm going to go to the next screen, and remember, we want to make sure and get those payment notes in there. We're going to select the total cost. Now, if you need to export this back to your origination system, you can always choose Fannie Mae Export, and then choose the loan you want to export back, and it'll prepare a Fannie Mae file for you that you can now import into your LOS. So that's huge. If you don't have them in your LOS yet, you can start in Edge, deliver the entire education to the borrower. When you've got a loan chosen, choose that loan in here, export it as a Fannie Mae, send it right back over to the LOS, and start the process. Now, as you go forward in the wizard, you'll see that you have additional places where you can enter verbiage about these. And when we're looking at our monthly payment savings, I mean, there's stock verbiage that's in here. I've already mentioned the taxes and insurance, but I'm probably going to pull out this may because it does include. Now I've got it in 2 places just to make sure my borrower understands. Now you have additional area in the short term where you can talk a little bit more about what these are. And I would highly recommend you put a little bit of color around what this is. Let them know that this is just a comparison of the unrecoverable costs. Let them know that the costs are interest, MI, and closing costs. When we compare those against each other, this is how we determine what your total costs are. Something like that. Now in the last part, you can choose which one you want again. Now I've chosen net worth because that's the most valuable metric that I have for the move-up presentation. But I'd probably want to add a little bit more color around this. I'd want to show them that, for this particular loan or for these loans, you'll see that your investment in the left side is only half of what your net gain is going to be on the right side. So to let them know that, hey, this net worth is what you're really looking for. And then finally, you get to the last screen. Now on this guy, you want to make sure to check the box to notify you when the report is viewed. You can choose to enable the call button if you'd like. These are the click to call features that'll put a little green button on your report to allow your borrower to connect with you on the phone through the internet. Kind of cool. But remember, if you've just started with us, you probably have 3 credits for free in here. Once you run out of credits, you'd have to purchase more if you want to continue to use this. We'll never automatically ding you for these, so it'll actually require you to go into the software and purchase. But if you don't want to use those, leave that unchecked. It won't show up on your report. And then, of course, if you are partnering with somebody, make sure to check this box here so your partner receives an alert notification when your borrower views it. And then for compliance, make sure you've got a quote date on here. This is very, very important. Anytime you quote a rate anywhere, you want to make sure you tie it to a date so that you're not called on the carpet later on down the line because they expect you to have the same rate. Last step, generate the link. Now this link that comes up is the link that you're going to send to your borrower. And of course, copying your CPA, financial planner, realtor, whoever you're working with on this. But what you do is you simply select this link, right click on it and copy it. And then you're going to paste it into an email to your client. So you'll come in here, you'll enter your partner or your client's email address, give it a good subject line, and then do something like click the link below to see your purchase options. And you're going to paste the link in there. Now, alternatively, you can actually choose to mask the link. And a lot of people like to do this. And of course, you guys can use whatever verbiage you'd like for this. You can say something like, click here to view your personalized home buying report, something like that. But if you want to do it this way, where you're actually going to use a word instead of the link, what you do is select the word that you want to make into a link, right-click on it, choose Hyperlink, and the text to display is what's going to show on the screen. The address it's going to point to, you're just going to right-click and paste your edge link in here, and then hit OK. Now these are 2 different options. If I click on this one, it's going to take me to the same place as if I clicked on this one up here. So keep this in mind. It's a nice way to kind of refine your emails so they're a little bit cleaner. And a borrower may look at this and kind of wonder what it is and maybe not know. But when you've got one of these where it's hidden, they're not looking at the link directly. They're looking at it as, oh, this is a presentation that he's prepared for me. So it might be a better option for your borrowers. All right, so with that being said, I think I'm going to go ahead and close out for today. Again, if you guys have further questions, our support team is always happy to help you. Shoot us a quick note at support or hit the help button here. You can submit a ticket through our support portal, but we usually will try and get back to you within about 10 minutes. Additionally, if you send us a note over at support and you don't receive an email immediately telling you that we received it, you might not be receiving our emails. Our system automatically sends you an email when you shoot us one. So if you've sent us a first-time note here, it's not a follow-up to a previous ticket, you'll get a notification right away via email that says our support team has seen your ticket, we're reviewing it, we'll get back to you shortly. If you don't get that email, it's getting blocked by a spam filter. So there's 2 addresses you'll want to add to your spam filter as allowed address. One is support@mortgagecoach.com. The other is support@mortgagecoach.zendesk, Zendesk, zendesk.com. Now, the reason for that, Zendesk is the ticketing system we're using. And even though our emails appear to come from support, it's coming from that ticketing system. So your spam filter might recognize it as not being the same address it expects. So if you make sure and enter that Zendesk one as well in your spam filter, you'll always get our correspondence. But with that said, let's go ahead and wrap for today. Shoot us a note at support if you have any further questions, and all of you have a wonderful day. Thank you very much for joining us. And if you'd like to attend the beginner's course for tomorrow, shoot us a note at support. We'll get you a link to register for that. That's going to be a little bit more cursory than what we discussed today. But then again, I'd love to see you come back next week as well. So take care. Everybody have a wonderful day. Talk to you again soon.